I am involved in this lawsuit against Monsanto because, in part because at least, I wanted to honor my Quaker ancestors who settled in Frederick County, Virginia in 1730 and farmed with the kind of integrity that I feel if we still had it today, we would have the nutritious quality food that I believe we should have. The food that we need is the food that our bodies have over all the years that life has been in existence, have become accustomed to expecting, to have evolved to utilize. And when you start to mess around with the genes and create new proteins and do things that change the nature of that food, turning off genes and turning on other genes and do it in random ways, you create problems. And we're seeing that from research now in other countries. So the issues, as they are being revealed to us from other countries, are very, very serious. But in this country, we are prevented from getting that research done because the patent holder gets to control the research. They can control what research is done, and they can control what findings are released after the research is done based on their patent ownership. So we aren't getting in this country the kind of research that is necessary to know whether transgenic food is truly safe. The industry says that it's safe. It's been based on some studies that were done by the OECD and National Academy of Sciences that say that transgenic food is substantially equivalent to any other food. The studies now from Europe, France, Russia, other places are showing that that's not true. That serious health issues are being discovered and documented. They're also being documented anecdotally by farmers who raise hogs and cattle and chickens even being fed transgenic grain. They see on dissection, they see changes in the organs. They see infertility issues and complete infertility as long as the grain is being fed, and early mortality, various things like that. But no formal studies of these issues have been done. The industry does 90-day studies. They want to get their stuff out into the market. So there's no multi-generational studies that have been done here. But the Russian Academy of Sciences did do a study, sponsor a study in which mice and hamsters were found to have as much as 50% mortality by the third generation. You need to do dissection in order to see the failings in the first generation, and then in the second generation you begin to see more, and you see smaller sizes, animal sizes, and also various feeding studies, even one in Britain by Arpad Pustai back in the 90s when they were first considering the introduction of transgenic potatoes, found a very marked comparison in sizes of the animals, and on examination he found that the animals became very different animals as a result of the various things that were happening as a result of the feeding. And this was not feeding totally a diet of the transgenic ingredient. It was a balanced diet with the transgenic portion only a portion of it. And I believe that's the way the Russian study was conducted also. So we don't even know in this country if a small amount is fully healthful, because those studies have not been done, and yet even the non-GMO project allows 0.9%, just less than 1%, in their food that they call non-GMO. And that's the only way they can get the industry now to be able to cooperate with the program, is to allow some contamination, because if they have that, they can bring in their supplies and they can mix them with those that they know to be uncontaminated, so that when they have a contaminated product, they can get it down below that level by mixing. And that, in fact, is what major sellers, traders do as well, because even in Europe you can sell product that is less than that 0.9%, and so they will find an uncontaminated crop and they'll mix it until they can get the percentage of contamination down below that level. So there's a substantial amount of contamination to be found, and you can read more about this on the Cornucopia Institute's website. They did a study of these things, and they found, for example, a natural cereal, not an organic cereal, but a natural cereal at Whole Foods that was 50% contaminated. So, and even in organics, if you don't know that it's contaminated, you're not prohibited from selling it. So and there's almost an incentive under the organic program for people not to know. And I have had people tell me that they believe that the issues of pesticide contamination are much worse than transgenic contamination, so that they're not concerned. They don't want to take income away from organic farmers by testing and finding their. Now, that's not most people. I think most people in the organic industry have integrity and want the zero contamination, because that's what's required. If you know and have tested your product and you know that there's even a tiny amount of contamination, then you're not allowed to sell it as organic. It's only that ignorance factor that enables people to slip through. And so there's this problem of an incentive not to test. And even the Organic Trade Association, which is the leading trade association in the organic industry, is so heavily, has been, at least in the past, it's a little better now, so heavily dominated by industry interests that they have not wanted to have an action level. See, on pesticides, if you have to stay on top of the issue of whether or not you've got any pesticide contamination. And if you get above a very small level, then you have to, then you can't sell it as organic. The product goes off the market as an organic product. But for transgenics, there is no action level at all. That's why you can get a high level of contamination and still have it be sold in the event that somebody's selling something without knowing about it. So these are things that we need to fix about the organic standard. And yet, because many of the large companies in the organic industry are affiliated with other companies that sell transgenic crops, they have been using their interest in keeping this whole thing fuzzy. They're the people who have an interest in getting involved and preventing things from happening. The standards are set by the National Organic Standards Board, and there's been a tendency for the people appointed to that board to be on the side of industry largely, and not the small, high-integrity growers in the industry. So you've got a serious problem, one that I think is not manifesting in the marketplace nearly as much as it is in the behavior of certain companies. Probably companies that many people, stores like this, don't want to even deal with, don't want to trade with. They're the ones that are owned by big companies that are part of a conglomerate that maybe you can buy at Walmart, because they're now selling organic products. But you won't find them in places like this where they're very concerned about who's doing what, to be very careful about these kinds of issues. Now, the lawsuit that we have brought against Monsanto is designed in the first level, at the central most concern, to simply bring a fairness into the way things work for organic farmers. Right now, if an organic farmer becomes accidentally contaminated by some other transgenic farmer's crop, and corn, soy, sugar beets, canola, organic farmers are not really able to grow canola anymore because the contamination is so widespread and complete, and transgenic canola has gone into being a weed. So it's in many places in the areas where they grow canola. So these crops you have to be very careful about. But there's also others that we're not carefully testing for enough, where, for example, crops in the brassica family, along with canola, like, for example, Russian kale, a fairly good variety of crops can be cross-contaminated from canola, and sugar beets, transgenic sugar beets, can cross-contaminate table beets, chard, and other plants in that family, and chard and sugar beets and regular table beets, the seeds are all grown in a small area of the Willamette Valley of Oregon, in the same place, in proximity, where they can or could cross-contaminate each other. And yet here we are, our salad greens are full of chard, and we're not checking to see what the level of contamination might be. As far as I know, people are not worried about it. So it's a serious issue for those organic farmers of high integrity who want to make sure that they have no contamination in their crop, and above all, if they would get that contamination, are not sued as a result of having found possessing Monsanto's gene. See, Monsanto operates under what's called a strict liability standard, which is a standard in patent law that says that if you possess the patented object, then you can be sued for patent infringement. And this may have made sense back in the times when a patent was on a mechanical invention or something that then you might be able to copy or sell as a competing product to the patented product. Maybe the strict liability made some sense, but in a product now, biological product that is free to travel in nature and contaminate, and it's not just wind-blown pollen that's a problem. There are other ways that the contamination can occur. For example, it can even rise on a convection and come down in the rainfall in some other place far away. It can get in the soil and contaminate the bacteria and fungi in the soil, and then the next time you grow something else on that soil, then it can convey the transgenes into that, and you can be unaware of what's actually happening. So farmers realize that if they were to get contaminated, they could be sued for patent infringement in the way that Percy Smizer was. Percy Smizer, if you've seen the film The Future of Food, was a farmer in Saskatchewan growing canola. He spent 50 years breeding canola that was particularly well suited to that climate, non-transgenic canola, and others around him were growing transgenic canola. And one day a neighboring farmer drove his truck full of canola seed by Percy's farm, and the canvas was rotten on the top of the truck, and so it tore, and the wind blew seed onto Percy's farm. So Percy learned about it because he was in the habit of using Roundup to kill the weeds around the power poles on his farm, and he saw that some of the canola in that area was not dying. And the word got out, and Monsanto came after him. And he had to mortgage his farm and spend years fighting against them. And the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and in a 5-4 decision at the Supreme Court level in Canada, they found him guilty of possessing the patented object under that strict liability standard. And so that story is widely known in the farm community. And not only that, but there's other cases in the United States. There's the case of the Nelson family in North Dakota, where they were sued by Monsanto, and they felt that Monsanto's information was mistaken, and they had their own records that from their own testing to show what they knew from that. And then the father in the family had a heart attack, or had heart trouble. I can't remember if he actually had a heart attack, but he had some heart issue that arose, and they decided to settle the case and not go further with it, even though they felt they could have won. It was a family health issue that the stresses, they just didn't want to bear the stresses. So there's others in the movie Film Inc. There's the story of Mo Parr in Indiana. He was a seed cleaner, and Monsanto went after him for facilitating the cleaning of seeds by farmers, which farmers have always, who save seeds, have always done that. And some of those farmers that were using his service got contaminated, didn't want to be contaminated, but they were contaminated. So Monsanto went after him, even though he was just performing a service for the farmers. All of this basically seems like a campaign of intimidation in order to win control over the seed market. And they actually make it hard for farmers to even find seed that isn't their seed to grow. In many areas, that they work with the dealers in order to make the seed supply such that farmers will be pushed in the direction of transgenic crops. And they've done that in the major commodity crops to the point where now a very high percentage of the corn, soy, canola, sugar beets are transgenic in this country, so that most of the corn sweeteners that are in the products that people consume, most of the soy that's in many products, half of the sugar is beet sugar, so that's now transgenic. Those issues are very clear, that we're getting transgenics in our diet through these things. 75% of the food, the processed food in the average grocery store is transgenic. At least contains some of these ingredients that are transgenic, so that the food has become transgenic. Most people do not understand that. And yet, when people are asked in polls whether they want to eat transgenic food or know about whether their food is transgenic, 93% have said that they obviously want to at least know.
So I'm not sure how many Americans know who Monsanto or what Monsanto is. The last study that was done on American awareness of genetically engineered foods in our diet revealed that only 26% of American consumers were aware that we are actually eating genetically modified foods today. Most people continue to think that genetic engineering is in our future. It's, part of what scientists are working on so that we can develop crops that will withstand climate change and feed the world once the world's population starts to grow exponentially as it is. But they're not aware that this is actually part of our everyday reality. It's surprising to think that only a quarter of Americans know that they're actually eating genetically engineered foods today, because almost everybody does. A soda is mostly made out of genetically engineered corn syrup. You can't buy a package of crackers that doesn't have genetically engineered trans fats in it, it seems. So all of these ingredients are all over our grocery stores. 90% probably of our packaged food contains at least one genetically engineered ingredient. And to think that people don't know this is quite disturbing, especially considering the fact that most of them say they wouldn't eat genetically engineered foods. A majority of Americans say they would, they don't know, I don't think I'm eating genetically engineered foods now, and if they were offered to me, I wouldn't eat them. That's the position of most U.S. consumers. But the reality is that there probably isn't a single person in the United States that has not eaten a genetically engineered food. And if people don't want to eat them, they better get active on the issue and become more aware. The issue that Organic Consumers Association is making our primary cause right now, and we have been for some time, is the issue of labeling genetically engineered foods. Monsanto opposes the labeling of its own products. As proud as it is to make claims that they're going to feed the world and they're going to help farmers adjust to climate change and they're going to help farmers in developing countries, the fact is they don't really want consumers to know that their products are in the food supply already. It's not an accident that only a quarter of Americans are aware that they're already eating genetically engineered foods. Monsanto doesn't want them to know. We've already seen in California, where we're running a ballot initiative campaign for 2012. This will be on the ballot in November 2012, the issue of whether or not to label genetically engineered foods. And 2 trade associations that are backed by Monsanto have already started to donate money to an opposition campaign to stop this ballot initiative, or at least to win when it goes to the ballot to the voters. So that doesn't seem right. If Monsanto thinks their products are so great, why shouldn't Monsanto label these products? But the funny thing is if you go to their website and read their talking points on labeling, Monsanto says, oh, well, consumers who want to avoid genetically engineered foods can eat organic. Organic foods don't contain GMOs, and they're labeled organic, so we already have a labeling system that enables consumers to make a choice on GMOs. Well, that's true, and we certainly support organic, and I guess it's nice to know that Monsanto supports organic. I'm not sure how genuine that is. But the fact is that Monsanto knows that, the few customers and consumers who are aware of GMOs certainly choose organic whenever organic is available, but they also know that as long as they can keep people in the dark, people will continue to eat genetically engineered foods because they're unaware of the fact that they've been engineered.
In 2007, President Obama, when he was campaigning for the presidency, said that he was in favor of labeling transgenic food. But nothing has happened. We're now 4 years into his administration, and not only has he not labeled the food, but he has not stopped the flow of more transgenic crops into the market. Over a half a dozen in 2011 were introduced into the market. Transgenic alfalfa being a main one. That had been stopped by a court case. So the Supreme Court dictated that they have an environmental impact study before they released transgenic alfalfa into the market. So the USDA did an environmental impact statement, but it had no meaning because no independent objective research was done to find out. They used cut and pasted the industry research. in order to create the environmental impact study on the basis that they had the right to control the research. So, but this is not to pick overly on the Obama administration. This whole problem was started in 1992 when Dan Quayle stood up at the end of the Bush-Quayle administration and said, this food is generally recognized as safe. And this was because George H.W. Bush said to the industry, come see me, boys. I'm in the business of deregulating. I want you free to do whatever you want to do to earn profits and create jobs and make industry flower. And he did that. The administration did that in spite of the fact we now know that scientists at the FDA had severe reservations about the safety of the products. They had concern about toxicity. They had concern about allergenicity. All of these things have proven to be so. There is a toxicity issue, we now know, and there is an allergenicity issue, but those are only the beginning of it. There's much more serious issues in terms of the larger health impacts, even than that. So this is a basic thumbnail of the issues. Our lawsuit is designed to basically bring an action in order to ask for a declaratory judgment from the court that we're not doing that organic farmers are not doing anything wrong when they accidentally get contaminated, and stop the ability to bring patent infringement suits against people who are incidentally and accidentally contaminated. But we also intend to take the technology to court. We claim in our lawsuit that the patents should be invalidated, that they never should have been issued. And that's not because we're against the idea of transgenic creation of crops. It's just that we should know a lot more than we do know now. See, right now they shoot in with a gun, and their transgenes, and those genes land at random in the DNA structure on different chromosomes, and so the impacts in one particular kernel of corn may be completely different than the impact in another kernel of corn, for example. So it is a science that's at its very beginning stages, very, very scientifically ignorant still, and yet we've rushed it into the market in a massive experiment to find out, by using people as the guinea pigs, whether or not this is safe, without doing the study ahead of time. And it's our contention that that's wrong, that they've done it backwards and that it should be stopped. They argue that their product is substantially equivalent, and yet it's unique enough to deserve a patent. How is that? How does that work? So these issues we want to put on the table and have an opportunity to, for the first time, because we can't get it in the Congress, and we can't get it in the White House, simply because there people are seriously indebted, really, to these companies, because of the political money, because of the campaign contributions that they give. The Obama campaign, for example, 50% of the money came from the people. This is 2008, but the other half of the money came from industry. And that's why Michael Taylor was appointed as the food safety czar in the FDA. He was the same Monsanto attorney who had come into the George H.W. Bush administration and oversaw the original introduction of these foods, and bovine growth hormone as well, which is another Monsanto product. And now he's back in that same job overseeing the flow of these crops now into the market over the last few years.